In this video lecture, we're going to go over the last part of Chapter 3, the cell, looking at the different types of connective tissues and that form from cells itself. And we're going to first start off by doing a review. So this was from your last slide from the last video lecture. And let's go over these answers. And so as a review, the different organelles, a cell with abundant peroxisomes would most likely be involved in what? Well, what is that role of peroxisomes? Okay, so for detoxification, converting all of those free radicals into hydrogen peroxide, so we have detoxification activities. Now I want you to define a cell and organelle. And so a cell, this is the smallest functional unit of life, and how it's able to work and operate are by organelles. And so organelles carry out the metabolic and chemical reactions of cells. Okay? And so how those organelles and cells work together. Now describe the relative roles of DNA and RNA in protein synthesis. Okay, so DNA is what? It's our blueprint of life, and because it's too large to exit our nucleus, we can copy a gene, which is a portion of that DNA, through RNA. Okay, and so from RNA we can use this to synthesize proteins. Okay, so DNA is too large, we can photocopy it through what process? Good, transcription, to form messenger RNA, and then from RNA to proteins it undergoes translation. So that's how DNA, RNA, and proteins are all interconnected together. For the rest of this PowerPoint, we're going to go over this last portion of Chapter 3, and that's the body tissues. Now, what are body tissues? Cells, two or more cells that carry the same function, and they can secrete an extracellular material and fluid around them, collectively give rise and combine to form tissues. And tissues are specialized cells collectively that have some sort of function. And so there are four categories of tissues we have within our body. We have epithelial tissue. These cover exposed surfaces, whether that's on the outside of our body, so we know this as our skin, and then also the inner part of our body, so all the way from our oral cavity down to our anus, that inner long canal called the alimentary canal. Lining internal passageways and chambers, our respiratory system also composed of this epithelial tissue, and it produces glandular secretions. A lot of our sweat, a lot of our mucus, all of that is produced by this epithelial tissue. And so there are three main types of epithelial tissue that we have. They can either be classified as being single layered or multiple layered. Next type of body tissue we have are connective tissue, and this is the most abundant type. So if we don't cover it as epithelial, as muscle or neural tissue, it's going to be connective tissue. So this is the one that fills internal spaces, stores lots of that energy, and has support. So we know this as our blood, bones, we have cartilage, and we have loose and dense connective tissue. Next category of body tissue we have our muscle tissue, and this one main function is going to be for movement. So we have three different types of muscle tissues: smooth, cardiac, and skeletal, which we're going to go over. And then finally neural tissue, and this one is that fast acting response of our body in order for our body to communicate amongst each other. And we do that through neurons and supporting cells. Supporting cells really just help maintain all of these neurons, which do all of that work. Okay, so just like this chapter, and as you go through all the different chapters for this course, what I want you to do is kind of outline. This is going to help you study. So I had some questions about how do you study for these exams. Okay, so you can put the category as tissues on the very top, and then you have A, B, C, D. You can put your epithelial, you can put your connective tissues, your muscle tissues, and then your neural tissues. And then from here, you can start describing them. Okay, so this is one way you can organize your notes and help you get organized for your first exam. All right, so let's going to first start off with this epithelial tissue. And epithelial tissue is avascular. What does that mean? That means that there's no direct blood vessels running in these tissue cells. Okay, so they're avascular. And the only way that these tissues and cells can get all those nutrients and oxygen is by diffusion. So diffusion of gases and nutrients, from underlying tissues. But epithelial tissue itself, this does not have a direct blood vessel running through these layers. And the function of the epithelial tissue is that they form barriers and they cover internal or external surfaces. Okay? And so these cells, because these are barriers and they line internal and external surfaces, and if you think of your skin, this is one type of epithelial tissue. It's being in constant contact with external environment. And because of that, what happens? It's going to continuously shed and replace itself. And so another thing about epithelial tissue is that cells are continuously replaced, and these cells fit close together and often form sheets. Okay, so we had body coverings, we went over that, body linings, glandular tissue, so any secretions. And so on our body surface, what do we have? What are some type of secretions? Good, we have sweat when you're working out. We have sweat glands. And what about that face? What makes your face nice and shiny when you don't want it to be shiny? Good, oil. And we have specific terms for this, which we'll get into in a little bit. Protection, absorption, filtration, secretion, major functions of this. Okay, let's go over this. So here is an epithelial tissue. This nice connective flat sheet. We can have sheet-like connections of all these cells. The outermost surface is always going to be the apical surface. And so if this is my body, here is my, I'm going to do a, okay, wait, it's like a Pac-Man head. I know, I suck with drawing. It looks like a hand, but it's supposed to be the mouth. All right. Oh, that's really bad. Oh, okay. And I don't know why I have square feet, but I have square feet. Look at my hands, look just like my head. All right, so here, outside skin is facing the outside, so this is the apical surface. And here's your mouth, and your mouth has this long canal, goes into your stomach, intestines, then out the anus. Okay, and because this inner lining here is facing the outside compared to, so this, I'm going to get another color so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's go with red. Okay, so everything here in red, because this is facing that canal, this is also the apical surface. So this innermost layer is going to be the apical surface. Now the bottom layer down here, right on the bottom of that, this is going to be the basal surface. So this is a layer that's more deep. Okay, and it's found closer towards your muscles and your bones. And so this outermost layer here is our apical, so underneath this, right, immediately below that, this is going to be our basal. And since I use, let's try cyan. What color is that? Okay, so here's your red facing the outside, so cyan. Right underneath that, being closer, or right underneath that, here we are, cyan, blue. This is going to be that basal surface. Now, we can also classify, let's go back to blue. We can classify this epithelial tissue in a couple of ways. We can class them by how many layers they're composed of. So here you can see a single layer, or they're composed of multiple layers, and also their shape. Okay, so let's get into that in a little bit. But I want to talk about more about these modifications at the apical surface. So both of these are modifications at the apical surface. And so we have two modifications. Okay, so we can have, first thing we can have are what are called microvilli. So these are microvilli over here. All of these are microvilli. And these look like little finger-like short projections. And the function of these microvilli are for absorption. Okay, and where do you think you're going to want to have a lot of absorption? Where in your body do you think you're going to find a lot of these? Good, in our digestive system. So we're going to find this within our digestive tract, and specifically within our small intestines. Another function is secretion. And the reason why is because we can increase the surface area of the cell. Okay, let's take a picture, a really quick illustration of what I mean by that. Let's say this is your cell. Okay, so here it looks like a column. Okay, so this is called columnar. And here is our nucleus. And if we're in the intestine and we want to absorb all these nutrients from that diet that we just consumed, what do you think is going to be able to access and absorb more of those nutrients within our intestines? A cell that has a surface that's flat like this, or a cell that has a surface that's flat, that's shaped just like this, right? So A or B. B, right? Because this distance from here to here, we'll just compare it here, is about that long. If we lay this flat, all of those curves, it ends up being about twice as long, if not more. And because of that, we can increase all the surface area for absorption to take place. We can take in more nutrients and take in more things into our body. So this is why this surface area is really important. All right, let's clean this up. Now let's look at cilia. Function of cilia, cilia beat in a coordinated fashion, and it helps to move fluid or substances along. Now, what do we mean by that? So here are the cilia. They're much longer, and what they actually can do is it can have this nice sweeping like movement. So you can go back and forth. So after time, it can go this way and go this way. Okay, so just like the anemone in the ocean, going back and forth, sweeping along with the currents. Same thing here with the cilia. It can sweep back things and particles back and forth. And so two areas where you can see cilia location. One in our respiratory system. And so this is especially crucial if you have, let's say, bacteria, dust particles, other pathogens coming into your respiratory system. And you can also secrete mucus here within your respiratory system. Well, what's going to happen? All of the cilia can engulf and trap all those particles within your mucus and help sweep it back towards your mouth and your nasal cavity. So you can sneeze it out, cough it out, spit it out, and whatever, get rid of it by your body. Now another area where you'll find cilia, so respiratory system. Another area you can find it is in your fallopian tubes for women. So here are the ovaries. Here's a fallopian tube, the uterus, and then the vaginal canal. And so here is where our ovum gets released by each of these ovary, or well, one ovary. It's going to release an ovum. And then this, in order for this ovum, once it's fertilized or not fertilized, in order for this to move towards our uterus, it needs to move in this direction. So it does that by cilia that helps sweep it across towards that direction. All right. Next area that we have is that basement surface of the epithelia. And the function of this is that it strengthens the epithelial tissue against distortion. Okay? It's under all the epithelia. Okay? And it helps anchor basal cells in place. So what are these basal cells? Here is our epithelia. Okay, so here is that when I was giving you an example of, we have many layers of cells, and the bottommost layer of cells, these are called the basal cells, and we're going to learn about these basal cells in chapter 4. But in order for these basal cells, the most bottom layer of our epithelial tissue, to be anchored in place, we need that basement membrane. Okay, so here's that basement membrane. Now, a couple of slides ago, I mentioned we can classify each of these cells by their layers and also by their shape. And so the first thing we're going to look at are the layers. If that cell is composed of a single layer of epithelial cells, so there's a single layer of epithelial cells, this is called simple epithelium. Now, if it's composed of two or more layers of the same cell, we call this stratified. So stratified deals with all of these layers. Okay, but I also remember I mentioned to you we have different ways we can categorize the shapes of these cells, and there's three that we're going to look at here. Squamous. Squamous means flat. Ooh, there's my power. Cuboidal. Cuboidal means cube shape. And then columnar means the height of the cell is longer than it is wide. Okay, so longer than it is wide. So we have this nice column-like structure. But of course, we don't just give something a shape or the number of layers, we combine them. And so different ways we can do that. We can call them. So for this, you don't have the slide on your PowerPoint, but I want you just to insert one slide right now. There are a couple ways. We can say simple, squamous, epithelium. In which case, how would this draw it? I want you to draw it right now on a piece of paper and describe how or what this would look like. Good. So this is going to be a layer, a single layer of flat cells. And so that's just going to look just like this. So all those flat cells, we have our nucleus in each one of those cells. Now another example, let's say I have cube shape. Here's my, and I have two layers of this. How would you describe this type of tissue? Great, so that's going to be stratified cuboidal epithelium. Good. So let's write that down. Oops. So stratified cuboidal epithelium. And then finally, how would you describe this type of tissue? Good. Simple cuboidal epithelium. Great. Now there's one more that we haven't mentioned, and this is what you're going to probably get quizzed on. And it does come up in your urinary system when we talk about that. And this is going to be what is called transitional epithelium. Okay, and so where do we find this transitional epithelium? We'll find this in our urinary bladder. And why is that so important? Is because this type of epithelium can stretch. And this is especially important in a urinary bladder. When here's our urinary bladder, it's empty, we don't have any urine in it, you just voided. But once you, if you just drank a whole liter of water or something, and now you're going to start filtering out all that water, you're going to start increasing the amount of urine you have here within your urinary bladder. And then now your urinary bladder is going to start increasing. In order for these cells to accommodate all this liquid inside, it needs to be able to stretch. So transitional epithelium has the ability to stretch. Okay, now other modifications to this epithelium, we have our glands, mention these briefly, and exocrine glands. These are glands that can be excreted through pores to the body surface. And so here we have a pore. This is an exocrine gland. It's going to secrete its contents directly to the surface of our skin. So we have two examples, and we're going to learn about these later. We have sebaceous glands, which are our oil glands, and we have sudoriferous glands, which are our sweat glands. Okay, so two that we have within our body. Now the second type of primary tissue we have are nervous tissue, and the main function of these are that they send impulses to other areas of the body in response to a stimulus. These are fast-acting responses of the body. Okay, and the cell that we're going to look at are these neurons. So here is a neuron. Okay, those different regions of the neuron. Here we have the cell body of the neuron. We have neuron processes, and so we have specifically we have areas called dendrites. They receive messages from other cells, and then we can conduct and send that message out to other regions, to other neurons, or to other regions of our body through axons. Okay, so two different things. Supporting cells, here are those supporting cells, help ensure that this, what we call this, we have this nice protective covering here called myelin, that all of our neurons are covered with that myelin to ensure that they're actually working. Second type of tissue category we have are muscles, and the main function of muscles is what again? Good, movement. And we have 3 different types of muscles depending on whether or not they're voluntary, involuntary, whether or not they have striations, and then whether or not they have one or more nuclei. So we're going to start off here with the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles, if we look at them, what do we notice? They kind of look like stripes, and so because of that, the stripe-like appearance means that they are striated. Other things we can notice is that this is actually one cell of a skeletal muscle cell. Okay, and so if this is one cell, what we notice is that each cell has more than one nuclei. So these are multi-nucleated. And also, if I tell you contract your biceps, contract your triceps, can you physically do it? Yes, you can. And so you telling your muscles to contract or relax, that means it's under voluntary control. So you can tell your skeletal muscles when to contract and when not to contract. Another function of skeletal muscles is that they produce heat. Okay, so that's also critical and very important, especially in areas where it's very cold. Another category of muscles we have are cardiac muscles. And where do you find this? Good. The only place you find it is in the heart. Cardiac deals with your heart. Okay, and so what we notice here, we have one nuclei. So one nucleus. Does it also have striations? Yes, has striations. And can you tell your heart to beat faster or slow down or stop? No. So your heart, your cardiac muscles are all under involuntary control. And another thing that separates the appearance, and you can distinctly know that it's cardiac muscle versus skeletal muscle, is the fact that we have the presence of these structures here. These are called intercalated discs. Okay, here's a quick review for you. This could also probably come up on your exam next week, maybe as an extra credit or a quiz question or an exam question. What type of connection between two cells allows ions and communication between two cells? You remember the tunnel? What was that tunnel called? Good, gap junctions. Okay, so we have gap. So these proteins were called connexons, but we have gap junctions that allow communication between these two different cells. And that being the case, all of these ions can go from one cell to the other, and that's how we can have coordination of cell contractions, and that's how different regions of your heart can contract at the exact same time. So it allows for coordination of movement. Last type of smooth muscle we have here is smooth muscle, and it's smooth because we don't have any striations. If you look at one cell, we'll also notice there's only one nucleus per cell. And anytime you see smooth muscle, this is all under involuntary control. And so our digestive organs, our stomach, we have smooth muscles within our stomach that allows the breakdown of food. We can move that along towards our small intestines and then into our large intestines. And the ability for things to move is all under the control of these smooth muscles. So we can't physically tell our stomach to stop moving, stop grinding and churning. We can't tell our intestines to stop allowing the propulsion of food from one chamber to another. All that's because it's all under involuntary control, and that deals with our smooth muscle. Now the last one we're going to go over is the connective tissue, and we go over this last because it's the most diverse category of all. And because it's most diverse, where do we find it? We find it everywhere. Okay, so it's everywhere in the body, and it includes the most abundant and widely distributed tissues. And because of this, since they're found everywhere, what are their functions? They bind tissues together, support the body, and they provide protection. And we can clearly see this protection one, providing protection, when we saw one example of being the bone. So there's other ones too, but just want to briefly just write that one down. All right. So looking at these connective tissues, they are widely distributed, and they also vary in vascularization. So some of them have blood vessels, capillaries going through them, and some of them do not at all. So some of them are vascular, some of them are avascular. And because of that, some of them will vary in the amount of living and non-living substances found outside of the cells. And all of this is called extracellular matrix. So extracellular matrix, this is the non-living material surrounding living cells. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Here is a cell. It's going to grow and divide and grow and divide. Here's the nucleus. And it can start secreting this non-living substance. It's kind of like, you can think of it as kind of like a jelly or sweat or something hard that allows for the cell to be suspended in it. And you can have another cell secreting its extracellular matrix. Okay. And so you can have another one with its extracellular matrix. What are those yellow guys called in Despicable Me? I can't remember the names, but it's starting to look like the eyes of those yellow guys from Despicable Me. Minions! There we go, minions. Okay. Alright. Moving on. Okay, so looking at these connective tissue types, we have 5 major categories. Okay, so bone, cartilage, there's 3 different types that we're going to go over. Dense connective tissue, loose connective tissue, 3 to know, and then finally blood. Okay, for your exam, what should you know about this stuff? You should know what they look like, so be able to recognize the appearance of the cartilage, each type of cartilage, each type of connective tissue, dense, and blood. So it's going to be hyaline cartilage, loose areolar tissue, loose adipose tissue, or loose reticular tissue. You can identify it as that. And then also the function. Okay, so we're going to go through each of those right now. Bone, we're going to start off with this one. This is going to be most important function is structural support. Of the body that serves as an attachment site for muscles. It's responsible for the production of red and white blood cells, and it also stores calcium and phosphate. Okay, and this is why they always tell you when you're a child growing up, always drink your milk because it's high in calcium. And where does it get stored? It gets stored in your long bones, and therefore you can start growing taller. And of course, did I take my calcium growing up? No, I didn't. Okay, and that's why I am not that tall. Plus my genes. Okay, moving on. Next we have the next category. We have our cartilage, and the first one we're going to go over is hyaline cartilage. Okay, so here is that cell, and here is that extracellular matrix. So you notice here is that cell, it's suspended in this extracellular matrix. So the specialized cell is called a chondrocyte. Chondrocyte will start secreting all this matrix, and that's how this chondrocyte can be held in place. Alright, so cartilage, this is hyaline cartilage, I'm sorry. This is not as hard as bone. It is more flexible. But it still provides support and structural reinforcement. Okay. Here is a great example. Here you have your ribs. Here is your breastbone, so your sternum and manubrium. Okay, and in order for these to connect, we're going to have this hyaline cartilage. So hyaline cartilage connects your breastbone to your rib bones over here. And so what lies underneath your breastbone? Your heart and your lungs. And so here, all this hyaline cartilage in dark purple, this can expand or it can move, increase and decrease its size every time you inhale and exhale, but it also provides this nice structural support so that you still have some protection for your lungs and your heart. Okay, so supporting structures. We can find this attachment between the ribs and breastbone. Another area you find it is the larynx, or that Adam's apple. So if you feel the Adam's apple, that's the larynx. Next category, or next type of cartilage that we have, is the fibrocartilage. And this function is that it's highly compressible. And it can be used to withstand stress. Area that we find it between the vertebra. Okay, and so here we have it. Nice cushioning support. Every time you jump up and down, it can also help absorb that shock while still giving that great structural support. Next type of cartilage we have elastic cartilage, and this one is very flexible, and so we can still maintain the shape. So you still have this shape of the ear, but you can also pull and tug at your ear, and eventually it'll end up recoiling and go back to its original form. So it has the ability to maintain the shape, but also become flexible. Okay, here are those cells called chondrocytes, and here is that matrix that it secretes to hold all of these chondrocytes, which come together to give rise to that tissue. Okay, so chondrocyte, here's another one, and then our matrix. Right. Next category, dense connective tissue. And these are strong, rope-like structures that anchor skeletal muscles to bones, and in that case, we call them tendons, or bones to bones, in which case we call them ligaments. Right, so here are ligaments. This is one bone to the other bone. And then tendon, here's our muscle attaching that towards our bone, so that's being the tendon. Next category we have is the first type of loose connective tissue, areolar connective tissue, and this is the most widely distributed connective tissue that helps with holding internal organs together. Excuse me. Okay. You'll see your epithelial tissue, and underneath your epithelial tissue is where you'll find your areolar tissue. And so it has the ability to act like a sponge, and this can give rise to that edema appearance. Okay, so that's the areolar tissue. And so you notice here we have fibers, matrix, nuclei, we have fibroblasts that gives rise to all this areolar tissue, elastic fibers. Next category, next type of loose connective we have is adipose tissue. And so here we have this vacuole, and because this is so large, it ends up pushing the nuclei towards the side, which is why you'll see these nuclei laterally. And because most of this, here's one cell, is composed of all of that fat. And so the function and purpose of this adipose tissue is for insulation and storage of what type of lipid? What will give us the energy? Good, triglycerides. Perfect. Next type of loose connective tissue we have is reticular tissue, and this one will support free blood cells, mostly your white blood cells. Okay, so here we have reticular cells, blood cells, and the fibers. And here's our spleen. So our spleen is this nice area where we can help filter out our dead and dying red blood cells, but also we can start filtering out and screening our blood itself. And so white blood cells are going to be there ready, waiting to see what pathogen or what other thing is into our body that we can start attacking and mounting an immune response towards. Finally, our last connective tissue we have is blood. Now, I want you to be careful of this, because if I say on an exam, a blood cell, okay, so like a red blood cell or a white blood cell, this is a cellular level of organization. But if someone says blood, in general, this is a tissue level, because this is two or more cells with the same function. And so blood, what is the function? Transportation of oxygen and nutrients to cells and tissues. Okay. In blood itself, we also have these small structures called platelets. So we have platelets for clotting, and we have white blood cells for immune defense. Okay. And so it's also, we can transport oxygen and exchange all that carbon dioxide in our body for all that oxygen. So put in oxygen and take out carbon dioxide. We can also get rid of waste. Okay, and so blood is really the only medium in which we can get rid of things from our body, from lower tissues and cells. Okay, and so that is actually it for this last part of chapter 3. And once again, the best way to study for this entire chapter, watch those videos, be able to look at these illustrations. So I can go up, I can, on an exam, you won't see this. You might only see this illustration right over here. And then there might be a multiple choice question, A, B, C, D. Identify this type of tissue, and you would have to do reticular, and you would look for that as your answer. Alternatively, what else can we do for your questions? I can give you a function of one. For example, if we want something that has structural support and it serves as the attachment site for muscles and the skin, what are you going to select? Well, the best answer would be bone, right? So we can use tendons to attach these muscles to our bones for all of that support. Okay? So that is all for chapter 3.